This is A Citizen's Guide to Ragnarok, Book One, Gods in Low Places by Josh Hines. This is comedy fantasy adventure. The premise is this is Norse myths in a modern setting. The story of Astrid, who gets recruited into a plot to bring down the downfall of the gods, and her biggest barrier is the incompetence of the person leading the rebellion. Previously on, Astrid accidentally discovers that Loki is plotting to overthrow the gods. Loki fears being exposed, so he kidnaps Astrid and holds her prisoner. He wants her to understand why the gods need to be overthrown, and he tells her the following story while he has her trapped in his little basement of how Odin really got his eye patch. Odin faked wearing the eye patch because it looked cool, and Loki convinced him that Mimir, the therapist of the gods, can give him the wisdom if he trades his eye for the real thing. The following scene takes place in Mimir's office, a room dug out of the soil under the World Tree. Chapter 5, An Eye for Wisdom, Part 2. You told him what? Mimir said to Loki. Are you out of your mind? Odin's getting worse, said Loki. Every day he's more deluded, dangerous, and vain. They face each other, squared off on the thick rug over the soil floor of Mimir's office. It wasn't a large space, made smaller by the floral patterned sectional couch Odin put in, leaving little room for Mimir's red velvet sofa chairs and the photo-littered mahogany desk. Tens of thousands of snaking, overlapping roots held the dirt walls in place, from which hung Mimir's certificates and poorly lit snapshots of his dog. The creek softly ran from a corner of the ceiling, pausing in a sink-sized pool, which fed another trough emptying through the hole in the floor. Mimir tugged at the collar of his beige, short-sleeved dress shirt. I'm not taking his eye, Mimir said. I'm his goddamn therapist. I can't even begin to contemplate the ethical. You're not actually taking his eye, said Loki. I'm a god of mischief, not sociopathy. Then what's your angle? Snapped Mimir. I want to get him on camera, proving he's faking the one-eye bit. To what end? To humble him, said Loki. None of your interventions have worked. His ego will run unchecked over all of us. Heimdall's the only one not afraid of him, but he lets Odin do what he wants for some reason. The only way to bring Odin to reality is to expose him to the world as the delusional narcissist he is. I can't, said Mimir. It goes against everything I do. I just have to keep working with him to get him to reflect on himself. How many decades have you counseled him? A few. Have you ever known him to be reflective? He only comes to you so he can have someone to talk to for an hour who doesn't look at the clock. I still look at the clock. You know he's only going to get worse, said Loki. He's already talking about how Midgard needs to expand and how the Celts have more space than they need. He has the unfortunate mix of ambition, unchecked power, and stupidity. You know where this goes. He's like Hitler with multiple concussions. Mimir put his face in his hands. He keeps talking about immigrants. We have zero immigrants in Midgard. Someone once wandered over from the African burrow, and Odin called it an invasion that will destroy our way of life. I think the person was just lost. Mimir, you and I are the only ones who see it, but a video showing that he lied about losing his eye and then backing out of the ritual, it'll be the humbling he needs. Loki stared into Mimir's sad, conflicted eyes. It'll be a therapeutic breakthrough. Mimir placed his forehead on his desk. All right, Loki, he said in a voice that cracked with the collapse of another dearly held moral. What do we do? Mimir, Odin said. Can you keep a secret? That's literally my job, grumbled the immortal therapist. Odin lay on the couch in Mimir's office. Odin installed the sectional years earlier to make therapy sessions more like the ones in cartoons, and the long end of the L pressed against Mimir's desk where Odin rested his loafers. I don't actually need this eye patch. Well, I never thought you. And since we're bombing the truth, Odin said, looking at the creek, I sometimes don't feel so wise. Mimir froze, afraid to do anything to break the sudden self-awareness. Well, that makes sense. You can't possibly expect. You're really bad at your job, said Odin. You're supposed to say, how does that make you feel? Well, I'll tell you how it makes me feel, said Odin. It makes me feel like other people need to listen better to me. That's not really a feeling, said Mimir. Odin's feet dropped dirt and sand on a knocked over photo of the therapist dashend. The loafers brushed the hilt of the bejeweled dagger trophied on Mimir's desk. Loki said that you're interested in the. Mimir had to force the words out. The wisdom ritual. Oh, that, the Allfather said, his mouth sounding dry. I give an eye and I get the wisdom that Loki said you wanted to steal for yourself. Loki said, Mimir tensed, and what will you do with this wisdom? I'll shut up the haters, and maybe I'll think of ways to make people love me that don't require a snake pit. Do those rooms with the spikes in the ceiling that drop onto victims cost much? Mimir stood, taking the magic dagger off the stand on his desk. We're, going to do this then? I guess. Odin got to his feet and looked at the creek running down the trough-shaped route running through the wall of soil. He hesitated, then took off the eye patch. He reached into the bag he'd placed on the floor and pulled out a handheld mirror. I always thought that eyes should come in pairs. Mimir passed Odin the blade. To get the eye to pop out, you need to slide the blade under. I know how to remove an eye, snapped Odin. I had babysitters as a kid. Mimir fell into silence, pondering the Rorschachian implications of the statement. Odin stepped in front of the trough and held the knife blade pointed up, exposing both eyes to the hidden camera. Odin scrunched his lids closed. No, I can't do it. Mimir, out of sight behind him, shook his head. If you don't think you can. Can't? Odin shouted. Of course I can't. You just, said Mimir. The therapist released a breath. He was worried for a moment Odin would do it. Oh, what the hell? Odin turned back to the trough and pointed the knife at his face. Wait, Odin, said Mimir, racing to Odin, but too slowly. Odin plunged the knife into his eye socket. He screamed as he moved the hilt from side to side. Odin, you weren't supposed to actually. Odin hollered louder as something like a swollen, sauce-covered Sunday cherry catapulted from his socket, landing in the upper trough and spinning into the basin. It floated to the lower trough, its optic nerve flopping like a worm in a windstorm, and disappeared into the wall. Odin turned to Mimir, half his face covered in blood. I'm going to end the session a bit early. He grabbed his bag off the floor and exited through Mimir's rickety door. Mimir collapsed into his sofa chair, gulping air and willing down the panic clawing of his throat from his stomach. The panic drew his attention to the pink water in the basin, the blood on the rug, the knife, dropped blade first into the soil, and the signed oath on his wall saying to do no harm. Mimir counted his breath for several seconds. Loki spoke from the branch-covered hiding spot he'd spent the afternoon digging into Mimir's wall. Well, he took that a bit further than I expected. Loki texted Mimir a link to the first news story to show the anonymously leaked video. News pundits responded as if Loki had written the script himself, asking what kind of leader this is who fakes needing an eye patch and then actually removes his eye because he thinks it will make him wise. Late-night comedians wrote monologues and video bloggers raced to be the most cuttingly insightful. Odin's desperate need for approval became a meme, and the still of the Allfather with a knife in his eye socket became shorthand for someone who goes to absurd lengths to prove something no one needed proved. Odin showed up the same day at Mimir's office, kicking the door off its hinges and demanding to know why their private session was on the news. Mimir said that he was as shocked, more shocked than Odin. Odin tried to give him the squinty, skeptical glare, but used the wrong eye, which still hurt, and stormed out. Odin hid from the public, and his new portraits, printed, framed, and ready to roll out, sat in a Midgard warehouse in their brown wrappers until day 3. On day 3, Frigga, unable to enter their bedroom because Odin barricaded the door, climbed through the window's blackout curtains. Odin's blonde beard was reddened with cheese dust and his bed crinkled with chip bags. Leave me alone. You need to see something. She pressed play on the list of videos she saved. The first video starred a middle-aged man yelling into a dashboard-mounted phone as he raged through traffic. Those fucking libtards are attacking my allfather? I don't see any of them giving an eye for wisdom. He punctuated his rant by donning an eye patch, his last words being, I can't see shit in this. Maybe I should, which was abruptly cut off, his page title being changed days later to a memorial channel. Odin watched hours of videos like this, his followers flocking to his defense, screaming at the haters and putting on patches. Attendance at Odin's temple doubled, almost all of them wearing gold patches that featured slogans like, I believe, or blind faith. Construction accidents, car crashes, and sports injuries all spiked, but so did Odin's morale. Odin made more public appearances than ever, and he had an overflow section put into his temple. When Odin spoke, he did indeed seem wiser, especially to Odin. So yeah, said Loki, that's what happened. Morgan had fetched extra chairs. The captors sat a few feet from her, Loki leaning on his knees while Morgan clipped and filed her nails. Astrid poked chopsticks at her unfinished noodle mush, which was a fusion of chow mein and dollar store baby food, the inevitable consequence of an entirely Nordic society deciding it could make Chinese cuisine. Astrid uncrossed her legs and dropped the takeout box on the floor. She pointed a chopstick at Loki. You don't come out great in that story. Loki nodded, squinting at a deep-fried something that may have been a prawn punished for misbehaving in a past life. It curled up like a question mark, which symbolized its existence. That's how you know I'm honest. What do you hope I'll get from this? She said, trying to swallow away her noodle's coppery aftertaste. Well, said Loki, eating his deep-fried query, you should see that there's a good reason why I need to overthrow Odin. Right. Odin is dumb, greedy, clinically egotistical, and has no moral compass. Loki grimaced as he forced down the food. Exactly. Explain to me how he's worse than a guy who lies about his identity to sleep with a girl, kidnaps her, and holds her hostage. I got you lunch. You got me a food-shaped war crime. I'll tell you another story, and this one is even worse. Astrid slumped, air hissing through her teeth. She wiped a noodle off her sweatpants. Another story. Can this one come with vodka?